Hello Internet, this is Sophia. Recently, a YouTuber named, and I really hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but forgive me if I mispronounce it. Recently, a YouTuber named Javier Javier released a video asking his fellow atheists to please cut out all talk of there being a such thing as objective morality. He asserted that a lot of atheists supposedly talk about there being a such thing as objective morality, and that basically makes him want to facepalm every time he hears it. Now, I want to be perfectly clear that while I trust Javier that these atheists he's talking about who are going on about this objective morality thing, I trust him that they exist. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that they exist. I should still point out that I haven't personally seen any of them. As a matter of fact, those that I've been paying attention to are pretty much in agreement with myself and with Javier that there is no such thing as inherently objective morality. For example, I saw a video by Alex O'Connor, aka the Cosmic Skeptic, in which he is pretty much very strong about the fact that there is no such thing as objective morality. And why can't there be a such thing as objective morality? For a very simple reason. In order for a moral code to be considered inherently objective, you would have to be able to arrive at that code starting only from ontological facts. That is, facts that are not statements about what you should do, but about what does exist, what doesn't exist, what is, what isn't. And the fact is that any ethical maxim that you can possibly come up with that can be proven without at some point having to rely on a moral premise that you simply accept without proof would be a useless tautology, or something that is technically not a tautology but useless in the way that tautologies tend to be. For instance, I could come up with a maxim saying it is immoral to do bad things, but that doesn't really give you any guidance about what to do in life, because in order to know that it is immoral to do something, you have to know that it's a bad thing. Let's say, for instance, I'm contemplating robbing a bank. Is it immoral to rob a bank? Well, that depends. Is robbing a bank a bad thing? Now, of course, I want to state for the record, I definitely consider robbing a bank to be a bad thing. However, I cannot prove that without at some point starting with a moral premise that I can't prove. Now, there is one way to prove that a particular moral code is objectively invalid, and that is to prove that it contradicts itself. But you can't just rely on that to go through the process of elimination to disprove all wrong moral codes and zero in on the moral code that is right, because once you disprove all moral codes that contradict themselves, you'll still have plenty of moral codes remaining that, though they may be incompatible with each other, none of them that remain would be incompatible with itself. Here's an example of one hypothetical moral code that is indeed contradictory. Rule number 1. It is immoral to kill Bob. Rule number 2. It's perfectly okay to point a loaded gun at Bob's head and pull the trigger. Rule number 3. Given the opportunity, you must push Bob out of a 20-story window. Rule number 2 does not present an inherent conflict with rule number 1, but it does still present a contradiction, thereby already presenting a problem with this moral code. It doesn't present a conflict because if you don't kill Bob, even by shooting him, you are obeying rule number 1, and you also are obeying rule number 2, because though it allows you to shoot Bob, it doesn't actually require you to do so. Rule number 3, on the other hand, not only contradicts rule number 1, but potentially can actually create a conflict, because if you have the opportunity to push Bob out of a 20-story window, there is no way that you can obey both rule number 1 and rule number 3. Of course, there's more than one possible way of resolving this conflict, and you and I may not find all of those possible ways to be agreeable, but all of those ways will still result in internally consistent moral codes, which may be at odds with each other, but none of them, again, are at odds with themselves. For instance, you can simply remove rule number 2 and rule number 3 and end up having a moral code whose only maxim is that you're not allowed to kill Bob. And frankly, unless Bob presents some kind of threat to innocent people that cannot possibly be neutralized without killing him, I think that that's probably a good rule to have. But what if somebody tries to resolve this by getting rid of rule number 1 and keeping rules number 2 and 3? This would create a moral code that most of us would find probably to be quite disconcerting. However, it wouldn't in any way contradict itself. Or how about this? Keep all 3 rules, but establish an order of precedence. Like, say, the later a rule is on this list, the higher precedent that rule has, which basically means it's immoral to kill Bob except by shooting him or shoving him out of a 20-story window, the latter of which you have to do if you have the opportunity to do so. Now, this rule also is one that I'm pretty sure you and I will find to be quite disconcerting, but again, we cannot prove that it is inherently objectively wrong because in no way does it actually contradict itself. Of course, Javier disagrees with me on one point, in that he, at least from what I gather from his video, seems to believe that in a theistic universe, there is a such thing as objective morality. I would have to disagree with him there. Why do I disagree with him? Well, because the dominant religious systems of morality tend to be based on 2 premises. The first premise is that there is a God who loves us and gave us instructions as to how we ought to live. Again, a claim that I as an atheist find to be very dubious, but theists believe that, and in the universe that their religion describes, that would hypothetically be true. So, while it is a dubious claim, it is indeed an ontological claim. But the second premise is that if there is indeed such a God who gave such commandments, that we ought to do as that God instructs. And while that might seem like a no-brainer, it is in fact a value statement. It is not something that can inherently be proved in any shape, form, or fashion, even if you accept all of the ontological claims in the religion. The good news is that while there is no such thing as inherently objective morality. We don't actually need any such thing as objective morality in order to live our lives as best we can and even to structure society accordingly. I'd love to get into that now, but since this video is already going on long enough, I think I'd better discuss that in a separate video. So in my next video, I'll discuss why we don't need a such thing as objective morality. Anyway, this is Sophia here. Please hit the like button and please subscribe and share this video with your friends. And also you might want to hit the bell icon so as to increase the chance that you find out about future videos on this channel. And until next time, see ya!